This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org. Welcome to another edition of Maui Causes. Hi, I'm Sam Small. We've been talking to some of the candidates for county council, and it's so important that you participate. Voting is your right. It is your way to have your voice heard. And as people are seeing more and more, your voice does count. 2 years ago, with the Citizens Initiative having over 20,000 signatures to get on the ballot, for the first time ever, history was made to have a Citizens Initiative on the ballot. The county council did not support it. They tried to suppress it, and they weren't able to. It was on the ballot because you participated, because you signed a petition, and that made a difference. That historic process has had a rippling effect, and it has brought, for the first time, to Maui County a supply. People are coming forward to run for office that have never participated here before, that are seeing the opportunity, they are seeing the support of the community, and they are taking the chance of putting their neck on the block to be able to represent you appropriately and give you the choices that make a difference. For all too long, these islands have been controlled by political and economic forces that were a result of the exploitation of the plantation system. That system completely dominated these islands, and it is time for change. We have with us today one of the candidates, Richard Abbett, with an E, is with us today. Richard, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. We appreciate it. You've run for office before. This is not your first time at the rodeo.
Yes, I'm running for state representative this time, but previously I ran for county council on the Big Island when I lived there. And then prior to that, I ran for county auditor when I was on the mainland in Washington State after college.
It's so important that, people like you with experience in environmental issues, participate in these counties, in the county and in the state especially, because these issues are complex, and it takes people with experience to understand the whole picture and how the natural resources of these islands need to be protected. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
And it's about education. And that's my story is one that brings full circle. My mother and I were exposed, according to the doctors now, to atrazine when I was in the womb. I was born with birth defects. I was born with a leg turned in and an eye turned in and went through multiple surgeries before I was a year old. And it continues to the day. We don't use atrazine anymore, but we still use chemical cocktails and expose children and their pregnant mothers to them here. My mother didn't make it through a full life. She did make it to 60, and in her 60s then had a major stroke and then brain tumors and neurological diseases, and probably tied to her exposure to atrazine.
Atrazine is still being used.
It still is being used, but not to the degree that it was. And it was,
well, they use it. They've used it in the cane fields, and they used its cousin Atramin.
Atramin,
which is designed for the tropics.
Same with DDT, and then 2,4-D and T, and then we're seeing a new attempt to bring them back around, recombine them, and rebrand them and reuse them, because there is a resistance that weeds have built up over the decades, and they're no longer effective. And unfortunately, also, genetic engineering has taken a real black eye, because we have GMO corn that's raised here, seed corns that are very big in the islands, an economic power here now. And they themselves are actually just being developed for their abilities to withstand those chemicals and, you know, crossing or putting those genes from those chemicals in them. And without, in my opinion and most scientific opinions, erring on the side of caution and doing proper testing and not exposing children, schools, the drift. You know, it's an ongoing thing, and this has been a cause for me my whole life. When I left college and thought that I would return quite easily here, I found that we still had all the same problems and lack of economic opportunity too, so I ended up raising my children also on the mainland in Washington State, where I'd attended college. My parents made sure I got a good education. In high school, I went to a Jesuit college preparatory school, followed by Western Washington University, where I attended both Fairhaven College and Huxley College of Environmental Science, where I got a lot of my background that I applied in my employment. I then, as soon as out of college, noticed that because of the old growth logging in Washington State, that they were just ignoring the effects of the spraying of the clear cuts as well as in agriculture. And it seemed as if they weren't going to do anything and just keep doing business as usual, the status quo. It wasn't until that they actually started decimating their salmon populations that they started to realize the economic damage they were doing to their economic structure there. And so I started helping with adopt-a-stream programs and returning water into streams, planting riparian zones with Boy Scouts, with people doing community service through the courts, and then with nonprofit associations. And then we started habitat restoration groups. These are things that I'd like to help here in Maui and get started, and the time is right for it now. We're at a juncture in our history here in Maui where we're going to have an opportunity to return a lot of the water from Alexander and Baldwin's sugarcane plantation use. And they have said that they don't need that level of water. Sugarcane was very water intensive.
It is.
Next to rice, you know, it's just right up there. And so they themselves have said in testimony that they don't need it. But then in this legislative session, lo and behold, we saw an attempt, and one that, unless the governor vetoes it in HB 2501, they aren't offering to give back the majority of the water that they don't need. And you know, everyone feels they should be allowed to keep some water for their own use, for their own purposes. But for those purposes that other people need it for, and traditional Hawaiian and cultural uses are being ignored, as well as the opportunity that we have here for smallholder agricultural land development to occur. And as you know, we import over 90% of our food here, and then we're exporting 80% of what we grow.
Right.
And in the meantime, we've drawn down the aquifers, we've exposed the environment and our water to pesticides like atrazine and all these other ones after that. And now we know the folly of it. We know the folly of monoculture, and we've also seen the detrimental social effects of large landowner, off-island, corporate-owned, driven by profits, the effects that it has on all of us here, on our quality of life, our standard of living, and future opportunities for our children.
Right.
And housing is not affordable. It all ties together. We've got reefs that are dying, and not just from bleaching from climate change and the increase in temperature, but mainly from from on-shore activities.
Right.
The near-shore marine environment is right there. And so it's been getting hit for a long time. And here on Maui, we have another example of not using our brains right and not learning from experience. We're still using injection wells, which have been abandoned most anywhere else, that they have a concern for their marine environment. And it's like the goose that lays the golden egg here, between the Hawaiian culture and then the beauty and the clean air and the clean water, the snorkeling, scuba diving, the marine activities, the fishing. It all is tied together. And we've seen a degradation of it to the point where it's all threatened. And we could kill that goose that lays the golden eggs for all of us.
Sure.
And what industry is most reliant upon all these factors? The tourist industry. And like it or not, we're still tied to the hip of the tourist industry. But the tourist industry has potential to be different. And Maui is different. And of all the islands, we have a special opportunity here and now, with the closing of A and B particularly. But we need change. It's time. It's time for new leadership too. Yep. It's time for people who understand these things, who are committed to helping and dedicated to seeing results. And so that is how I'm here. I'm brought full circle back to the islands. I spent the last 5 years helping on issues on Big Island, and I had worked through the Resource Conservation and Development Associations back in the 90s, and was brought here to Maui, and then worked here for quite a while on those issues, including the injection wells, where we said back then, and I was quoted in the papers as saying, you know, that there were better ways to do things and that they would regret it someday if they didn't use the Clean Water Act monies that were available at the time from the federal government, and also the public's desire to do things right here. And people weren't listened to. It seems like everything is done in a vacuum here.
Yeah,
you know,
it is. There's an arrogance to the leadership in the county, certainly.
And so, you know, I had been brought here, as well as other consultants, to try to lend our experience and expertise, and then were not treated as if we were even welcome or that anyone was interested in. Mm-hmm. But I did sit down with those wastewater engineers and those county officials that were have had that under consideration for a while, and we said, you know, there are other options now, and you could use secondary and tertiary treatment options, including polishing lagoons, solar aquatic approaches, and then follow that with filtering it through a rock reed or a constructed wetland, and then use ultraviolet and return the water to drinking water quality. And it could be reused then for landscaping by what was then a burgeoning tourist industry and resorts that were being built, and we're going to put a huge demand on water like what we saw in Kihei. And then we had a situation here where the state legislature then allowed development of water and a pipeline to go to Kihei to fuel that development. That at the time was, I believe, the fastest growing area in the country for a while as a result of the ability to provide the water and the infrastructures there for that growth, which a lot of it went on county and state taxpayers' backs because of the way we chose to do it. And it was a big mistake, and now we're paying for it with a $100 million fine that's been assessed by EPA and the federal government, a continuation both at the state level in the legislature and on the different counties at the county council levels to continue to do things as we've always seen them do it. And they have not learned their lesson, and they don't seem to think that there is any validity to the concerns that the general public has about doing things different and keeping Maui, Maui.
Right.
You know, and other instances like when we had the super ferry proposal at the state level, but then also more recently on Mauna Kea, the TMT proposal, you saw them ignoring their own rules, administrative law, and laws on the books, and foregoing the proper environmental impact statements and considerations that they were required to do under law before granting permits. Now the courts have told them that was illegal and you have to go back and do it. The super ferries, it was too late.
Right.
It could be too late for the TMT. But these are not mistakes that are made as a result of people protesting or standing up and saying, now wait a minute, you didn't follow the law. They are the ones that made those decisions, and we all culturally, economically, and socially have suffered the effects of that.
Right.
So it is time. It's time that we finally put the puzzle pieces on the table and put a puzzle together that works and fits everyone's interests here. Not corporate investors internationally or from the mainland, and puts their interests first. Another example is cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Cattle are raised here and then they're finished on the mainland.
Right.
They're exported back if we're going to have some here at an incredible cost.
Sure, the carbon footprint is massive.
The carbon footprint is massive from it, and the additional costs are also. But not only that, but then we're not picking up the minerals in the soil that were there before.
Right.
They're being exported.
It's depleted.
Right.
Our soils are depleted because we're shipping it off.
Right. One of the things that we started with a few years ago on the Big Island was mobile slaughterhouse proposal through the Kohala Center.
Right, which is finally up and running.
Finally up and running after years, and there was examples of it in Oregon and Washington and South Dakota, and we had some far-sighted people here that said that would work here. It took us years, but we did it, and we can do that here too.
Right.
We can finish the meat here, we can sell it through the restaurants and the tourist industry and our grocery stores, and keep the profits here, keep the minerals here. It's just a better way of doing things.
Yep.
The problem with capitalism now is that it's run out of markets, it's run out of margin, and so what do? They cut corners, they blame it on other things. If there's any welfare state at all, it's actually to keep the corporations' bottom lines looking good for their investors.
Right. Well, we see that across the board.
Yeah, we do.
Where the corporations have so much influence at this point that the regulations are just all skewed towards their advantage and against the people. It's a system that is out of control.
Right. And one of the things I learned while I was in Washington State raising my children prior to coming back to Hawaii was that not only are there better ways of doing things, there's ways that actually fit everyone's interests, including corporations' interests. It's just on a longer time frame.
Right.
That's all it is.
Well, the corporations are mandated for short-term profits.
They're short-term profits, their addiction to those quarterly reports, watching the stock market overnight now, you know, all of it is so short-term that it's not anti-capitalism, it's just expanding the now, which we all need to do in life to begin with, to be present. And they need to understand that too, that their footprint here, their presence here in these islands, which has been long-term, if it's going to continue, they have to become sensitive to that. This is a sensitive environment, and it will be degraded even further and quicker than it was elsewhere in the world if we're not careful. It's a very desirable place to live, and we're always going to attract tourism just naturally because of the way this place is.
Right. It always astounds me that the tourist industry tolerates the presence of an agrochemical giant like Monsanto. That that people are not connecting the dots. That as the public across the world understands more and more about what is going on here on Maui, that there are open field chemical testing taking place upwind from the resort areas, that people would not be interested in coming to Maui because of that. And so we are putting our tourist industry at risk by allowing the presence of these multinational chemical corporations doing their experiments here.
And I think they're starting to get it. I think they are. They're starting to understand it, and the degradation of the reefs, they're starting to understand it.
Well, the ejection wells have done so much damage. Thank you for trying to stop them back in the day, because they are, tremendous amount of damage that's being done, both on the west side and at the cove in Kihei, which is the water quality is even worse over in Kihei.
That's right, and finally the research data is there, and it shows what all of us knew a dozen years ago.
I know a lot of people that don't go into the water because you come out with a staph infection.
That's right. And a lot of people have come here and then told me, we stayed so-and-so place, we'll never stay there again, because it's so close to that murky water and that, you know what I mean? And we have to drive so far, you know, just to be able to appreciate what we came here for. And that's what I mean. Like, it can be the killing the golden egg of the goose if we're not careful. But I think that we're seeing finally the level of understanding and appreciation of all man's effects. And when you add them up, it doesn't look good. Now, the one thing that had been kept under the wraps that we now know from more recent studies is the effect on the turtles, the hono. And the honu are showing up with lesions and cancer, and their populations are down, their mortality, and it's all directly related, according to the studies, to pesticide runoff for decades now. Okay? And so it's accumulated. It's a bioaccumulating problem.
Right.
And then we have these huge runoff events. It goes right down into the environment and right onto our turtles. And it's already a factor here in their mortality. And so we can't ignore it anymore.
And the short-term solution, of course, is to offer operations to remove the tumors. I understood that there was initiative to do that, to put a Band-Aid on the situation, to make the turtles look better for the tourists. They shouldn't have all these tumors. They want to rather than fix the problem. And that is the overwhelming problem on the county level and at the state level, is that there isn't the political will to take action to rein in these corporate interests.
And that's just sad too. I mean, that's a sad statement on a human being that tries to think creatively of ways to cover up and ignore and be in denial of something that they're directly responsible for profit. And that is not Pono.
No.
And we won't take it anymore in Hawaii. It's not going to happen. And I think everyone, and the younger generation now, the millennial generation and their children who are going to have to live with the world that we are living with them, are finally saying no.
And we're hoping that those young people come out and vote. It's so important here in Maui that you do register to vote. We have a primary election coming up on August 13th, and there is a deadline for registering to vote so that you can participate in that primary election. That's July 13th. So you need to be registered to vote by July 13th to be able to vote in the August 13th primary. And it is so important that you come out and do that. Support upholding the public trust doctrine. It is a unique feature in the Hawaii State Constitution that gives rights to the land. It gives rights to the natural resources in a way that no other state has ever done it. And it is a true understanding of the balance that is appropriate to have here in these Hawaiian Islands. It's so precious, these resources. They need and they deserve to be protected, and your vote will take action to protect these resources. It's the only way it's going to happen. It's your responsibility for everyone.
And the public trust doctrine was a condition of statehood to the state of Hawaii. And it's something that all our agencies are then chartered under. And in fact, on the mainland, it wasn't until they got a good appreciation of what the public trust doctrine was, because of tribal treaty rights also, that brought up the same issues, that they began to see that if they actually followed their trust responsibilities, that they would be doing this sort of long-term planning for the future, or as the Hawaiians like to say, for 7 generations out.
Sure.
And that's all we're really talking about. And getting 7 years out of the way the modern world does it is, to them, difficult for them to do. But it shouldn't be. No, it shouldn't be at all.
It is the right way to do things.
Right.
have a long-term perspective. And I don't think any of the candidates that are running are against development. We all recognize that there is an appropriate level of business to be done. It's how the economy works. We need that. We need growth, but it has to be in balance. That's what it's about. It's having that appropriate balance between what the people's needs are, what the environmental needs are, and what the business needs are.
Right, and what the environment can handle. And then finding that balance.
It is a practical limit.
So we have clean industries here. Tourism can be a very clean industry.
Sure.
Other people in other parts of the world are trying to get rid of industrialization and develop tourism. We already have it here. We have the infrastructure. Now we need to show the rest of the world what clean tourism is really like.
And ecotourism is a very important niche. In the marketing world, there's this thing called LOHAS. It is lifestyle of health and sustainability. And marketers know, the researchers know, that people are willing to spend more money to be able to have a holistic, environmental friendly experience. They make their spending determinations based on the carbon footprint, based on the sustainability of what they're involved in. They want to come on a vacation that is supportive of the environment. And those people are willing to do the research and find the places to go to be able to have the high-level experiences.
Right, and then they want to spend their money to support those sort of businesses.
They'll spend
to see
more
them
money.
Succeed.
That's
exactly.
Right. They'll spend more money to help those businesses succeed because of the mission that is attached to those businesses. And Maui is the perfect environment for those kinds of things.
And unfortunately, the leadership that we've had recently has been always looking at what they can do to accommodate what they're already experienced in doing, those industries' needs, and they don't seem to even want to understand. They seem to think that it's something that they need to hold off. They see it as a confrontation that's occurring between the old ways that they lament nostalgically that really weren't ever that good for most of the rest of us, honestly, and then think that it's a threat, but it isn't. This is an evolution, not a revolution. I mean, it's revolutionary, the changes that are happening right before our eyes, but they're the result of an evolution of awareness and education. People have more information and data and knowledge at their disposal because of the internet.
Right.
And so they have a greater understanding. And so it's time to get with it, get with the ticket here, okay? And it's time. And we are at a crossroads right here and right now. This election cycle shows that it's nationally happening and internationally also. Just what happened recently with Britain. And it's all because of an angst about everybody's recognition that we can't be in denial any longer of what we're doing to our planet and in our own backyards and what we're leaving to our children. That's what it is. Finally, people are starting to not just say, what about me, but what about our children and our grandchildren? If we're being stressed right now and thinking these things aren't acceptable, how are they going to feel? So that's one of the reasons why I've stepped up. I was looking at retiring, finally coming back to Hawaii, and then I kept remembering what my mother said. You'll be able to come back and live wherever you want in the islands eventually. You bring that education back. You bring that experience back, and then that's what you return to the mana. And that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm running. And that's why I want support and I need it. And there's other candidates out there too that a lot of people think that some of those people are long shots. In my race, I'm running against a very, very powerful man, the Speaker of the House. But there is not an understanding at the top.
No. No, they don't. We had the House members here on Maui, and a question was put to them about the public trust doctrine, and they didn't understand that the public trust doctrine imbues rights to the natural resources. They thought the public trust doctrine is what gave the public accesses to the hotel beaches. And it's so much more than that.
It is,
it's
but
so
that's because
that
the first successful cases, test cases, both here and on the mainland, in California mainly, and also on the East Coast, were because of access being taken away, and people had had traditional access for generations. And they knew it wasn't right, and they didn't know about the public trust doctrine, but then found out it was applicable to their state through statehood also. And so, but in Hawaii, they did know. They made it a condition of statehood here. They made us set up things this way. And so for them to not understand that is a little bit ludicrous, or if not, dereliction of duty. You need to know what the cards in the deck are that you're supposed to be dealing above hand fairly to everyone. And so that's what we need here is we need that, and then we need honesty, we need integrity from our leaders, and we need transparency to get the trust of the public back. To get a democracy to work, people have to have a trust and faith in the system, and then the rewards from social justice that provides affordable housing, opportunity for education and employment, and choices. And that's all that people have ever asked for here.
Right.
But they've been made to feel, maybe because of a hangover from a plantation mentality for 200 years, that they don't have basic human rights and deserve basic human dignity and respect. And that's what I'd like to bring here as a leader in the House of Representatives, and set that example, model that behavior, and then do the best that we can do with the people that are willing to do it.
You're running in which district?
District 8, which is Wailuku. And like I said, the sitting Speaker of the House is in that district. And a lot of people would feel that, hey, you know, that's the way you get power and return it to your district, is by being in there a long time. It's the way the federal system works. It's the way the state system works. But it doesn't work here in the way that it needs to work. And so it needs to change. And I think that we do need new blood. Those that have served, you know, they need to be thanked and respected. But it's time for change. It's time for a new understanding. It is, because
the old guard, the old school, doesn't have an understanding of the modern needs. They really don't see the difference of how much at risk our environment and our ability to live a productive, safe, and healthy life is. It's not part of their worldview.
But it is in their voters' view, and so I think that now they have to be sensitive to that if they want to remain in office, and if not, then, or if they would like to perhaps move on and enjoy the rest of their life in the islands, well, they should give a few of the rest of us a chance to do the job that we know we can do.
It's very hard when you get addicted to that power, and your whole life is set up, around those powerful situations, and you get lots of side benefits because of it. It's hard to give that up.
I can understand that, but I think it's time.
It is time. And I want to thank you for stepping forward, and putting your neck on the block to take a chance and support the people's needs rather than the corporations' needs.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor, and I will be doing this. I'm not going to just ride off into the sunset, and we will eventually have many other people like myself who are going to step forward in a responsible way and in an honest way, and show integrity, and allow the public to do the public's business.
Do you also have a website?
Yes, I do. It's richardabbett.com, Abbott with an E, A-B-B-E-T-T, and then people will be able to donate on that site. And they can also follow me on Facebook at Richard Abbett, and I'd appreciate their friendship also. And I will do whatever I can do to deserve to be called a friend.
Super.
All right.
Again, thank you very much for stepping forward and participating in the electoral process. It's so important.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of Maui Causes. Join us on mauicauses.org and watch us on Kaku and Facebook and YouTube. We're all over the place. We try and bring you the kind of information that you're not likely to see in the Maui news. You're not likely to see because they don't want you understanding these things. The powers that be like things the way they are. And like the candidates that are running for the State House and for County Council, we're looking to shake things up because change needs to come to these islands. The exploitation that is persisting through the plantation system needs to be dismantled once and for all, and the rights and these islands returned back to the people's control. Thanks again. Watch us. Aloha. This program is brought to you as a public service by Maui Causes. Maui Causes is a crowd-funded media production group that provides media production services to a variety of environmental and progressive causes here in Maui County. Visit us on the web at www.mauicauses.org.